The Euros and Copa America are finally done, and it's time to get into the Premier League. This year, the Premier League was very difficult for me to predict, and I'm not sure about you guys, but I think this is going to be a very chaotic and very unexpected positioning from a lot of places. But at the bottom of the table, in last place, this is one I think that a lot of people are probably going to end up having. It's Ipswich. I think they will come last due to the lack of experience that they have. The players that they have never competed in the Premier League, and their team is pretty much a championship side. McKenna is a good coach and has helped Ipswich promote 2 times in a row, but I think that ends this season. He just isn't going to be able to cut it out in the Premier League. He isn't experienced in the Prem, and so are the players, and I just don't see them coming up. I don't see them having enough in their team to manage to compete with the rest of the Premier League. And in 19th place, we have Southampton. This is another team that is just not up to par with the Premier League standard. They have a lot of players coming in, but none of them really are Premier League standard, and they're just not going to be able to compete with the rest of the league. I think Southampton is probably the weakest out of the 3 newly promoted teams. The only reason I have them higher than Ipswich is because Southampton actually manages to have some players that have played in the Premier League before, and that experience is going to be crucial for their season going forward, but it's not going to be enough. They will still ultimately go down back to the championship. In 18th place, I have Nottingham Forest. I don't think Nuno will be able to save this sinking ship. Forest will finally go back down to the championship after flirting with relegation for the last 2 seasons. The season prior, they barely escaped it coming in 17th, and the year before that, they barely escaped it again coming in 16th. They have some okay-ish players to good players. They have the likes of Gibbs White, Elanga, and Wood, who was able to score some goals towards the end of the last season, but that's just not going to be enough to stay in the Prem. They have released a lot of players and aren't really replacing them. So a weak team is only going to get weaker. It's going to be inevitable that they relegate this season. Now in 17th place, I do have Leicester. They're the only newly promoted team that I have staying up. I think their team is good enough to avoid relegation, even if it is just barely. They may struggle a bit due to losing their manager to Chelsea, and they also lost their best player, arguably, in Shrewsbury Hall. But I think they still have the tenacity and the experience to stay up. They've even done a decent enough job in the transfer market, bringing in the likes of Bobby de Cordova-Reid and Buonanotte from Brighton. These are some decent players to add to Leicester, and they were the best team in the championship already last season, so I think they look already better prepared than the 3 teams that I have relegating this season. Now in 16th place, I have Brentford. Brentford are just not as good as they were 2 seasons ago. Thomas Frank is a good manager, but he can only do so much with what seems to be a bank average team in Brentford. Their best player is Tony, who's most likely going to leave either at the end of the season or mid-season if they don't want to lose him on a free completely. But if they don't replace Tony with someone else now, because the player that they brought in to replace Tony is injured for 4 months, what are they? Their B plan already failed, so what's the C plan? It's going to be a tough season for Brentford, but I think the system that they play and the way that the players all truly play for Thomas Frank, I think that's going to be enough just to keep them just about safe. In 15th place, I have Everton. Brexit football hasn't let them down yet, right? Well, Everton should be able to avoid a relegation battle this season. They have a pretty solid team if you think about it. They should have done a lot better last season. Without the point deduction, they would have been higher up in the table. But I think their season wasn't all that bad. They were always a tough team to beat away, so I think they're going to either rack up points through draws or maybe even scraping wins at home. And since it is their last season at Goodison Park this season, I think it's going to be virtually impossible to see them go down. I don't think Sean Dyche's going to allow it. Sean Dyche is a very good manager, and his style of play suits Everton pretty well. Hopefully the money that they bring in from Onana will be put to good use, because there is now a pretty big gap in their midfield, and I'm curious to see what they do, but for now, I do have them 15th. In 14th place, I have Wolves. Wolves is one of those tough teams that I didn't know exactly where to place. I might have them a little high, I don't know, but I have a soft spot for Wolves. I think they're one of those good teams that always seem to be able to produce good players that end up getting poached by bigger teams. Pedro Neto this season, they're also losing their captain in Kilman, and that's another big blow. But if they can do something to mediate the damage done to them during this transfer market, I think they'll be okay. 14th might be a little high, but I think that's where they end up. I just don't see the other teams being as good as Wolves, even if Wolves is lacking a bit. But the only reason I do have them a little bit higher than the others is because they don't really seem to be a team that's focused on individuals. It's more about a system, and they play that system well, and I have them 14th. And 13th, I have Bournemouth. Again, it's another one of those places where I just don't know where to fit them in. I think Bournemouth has a pretty solid team, but they did lose Solanke to Tottenham, and they did get a hefty fee for him, so maybe they could use that money again in the transfer market, bring in someone to try to replace those goals, because he did rack up 19 goals last season, and I don't know where exactly they're going to get those goals from. They did bring in Sinistera, but he isn't exactly a goal scorer, so I don't know what they plan to do, but they should be doing something. And they also did lose Lloyd Kelly, which is further weakening them defensively, but all in all, I think Bournemouth will make some purchases in the transfer market. They'll probably end up being just slightly weaker than they were last season, but I don't see them getting better than their 12th place finish from last season, so I just have them one rank below. In 12th place, I have Fulham. Fulham is another one of these teams with a big gap left in their midfield. Joao Paulinho leaving the Bayern is going to be a massive blow for Fulham. I think Marco Silva is going to have a hard time finding a replacement. He might have to make do with whatever's in the club currently if they don't make a purchase in the summer. Fulham, I think, are going to come in 12th place due to the fact that I think they're bringing in some good purchases, good players that are offensively improvements to the team. They have some talents like Smith Rowe coming in. They already have Andreas Pereira. Muniz is already pretty good from what we saw last season. They are also bringing in some players to kind of mediate the damage done to them because they probably won't be as solid defensively. They brought in Sessegnon and they brought in Cuenca. So I think all in all, they're going to be around the same place as they were last season. But I think the transfers that they have made are going to do some good things for them. And Marco Silva is a good coach. So I think they'll be able to find a way around missing Paulinho for the rest of their season. And in 11th place, I have Brighton. Brighton is one of those teams that you just don't know whether they're going up or down, which is why I just have them staying in the same position that they were last season. I know they had a couple players missing last season. The big thing about Brighton is them losing to Zerbi. De Zerbi, in my opinion, was one of the best tacticians in the Premier League last season, and they're replacing him with a young, unexperienced manager, but he was able to help St. Pauli promote from the Bundesliga too. I don't know too much about Hurstler, to be honest, but I know Brighton, and Brighton is a very good team. And with still the same amount of players, same set of players from last season, I think they'll be just as good as they were last season. But they're not going to be improving anytime soon. In 10th place, I have Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace was on fire towards the end of last season, and Oliver Glasner is a really big part of that. I think his tactics, his way of managing is a lot better for Roy Hodgson, and it fits Crystal Palace to a T. If Crystal Palace can continue their form from last season, which involves Mateta firing goals, having Eze being that creative outlet, and having Adam Wharton being that energetic midfielder, I think they'll do really good to finish 10th this season. I think they're one of the more underappreciated, underestimated teams, but that also just comes down to how good they are performing in terms of form. But if they continue going in this trajectory, I think they can bring in some new players. They did lose Elise to Bayern, which is going to be a big blow to them because of what he was able to produce on the right wing. But them trying to diminish the damage taken from them by bringing in Ismail Sarr is a decent enough transfer for now. I don't think Ismail Sarr is going to be as good as Elise, but it is a player that has experience in the Prem, and it's going to be something that they have without bringing in somebody from the youth academy or just another transfer that just isn't going to fit in. And 9th place, I think this might be a crazy shout. Could not be. Maybe a lot of people agree with me. I'm not sure. But I think it's going to be Chelsea. In my opinion, Chelsea is just not being ran properly currently. They're just a mess. Pochettino getting sacked is just ridiculous in my opinion. He was finally getting them going towards the end of last season. We were seeing what that team could look like if they were ran competently. But they fired him. They're bringing in Enzo Maresca, who, fair to him, got Leicester to the Premier League. But he's also not experienced at all when it comes to the Premier League. Chelsea could struggle a lot. They just don't have any stability in that team. There's just constant getting rid of managers. They've gone through 4 managers in the last couple of years, and they just need to stick to one manager, have him build the team that he wants, and they could potentially get going in the right direction. They have all the talent that they could possibly want in that team. They have over 40 squad players. So like there is no excuse for Chelsea to be performing this badly. We've seen them in preseason, and preseason you can take it with a pinch of salt, but from what I've seen, this Chelsea team is nothing special. They're gonna be struggling a lot. There's no cohesion. There's no camaraderie. It's just a mess, and they will struggle. In 8th place, we have West Ham. Now, West Ham is a team that's doing it right in the transfer market. They have brought in the likes of Fulkrug, Rodriguez, Todibo, Kilman, Somerville, Wan-Bissaka, and who knows how many more of the players they try to bring in towards the end of the transfer season. Every single purchase has been done is a good one. They all have been thought out. They know what they're planning to do. They're going in the right direction. And I think this West Ham team could potentially even come further up ahead in the Premier League, but I just don't think that the other top 7 teams are gonna, they've all improved as well. They haven't really gotten worse, and they were all better than West Ham last season. So I have them in 8th right now. I think West Ham will be a very interesting team to watch, and I think having Lopetegui oversee the project going forward, it's going to be a very good next couple of seasons for West Ham if they manage to keep this momentum going. In 7th place, I have Aston Villa. I think Aston Villa is a very good team. Don't get me wrong. I just think that they will be struggling because of their participation in the Champions League this coming season. Aston Villa will struggle because they will have a hard time replicating what they did last season. Every team that goes into the Champions League for the first time in a long time always struggles, and they're going to be no exception. They haven't been in it since it's like the Champions League started, so it's been well over 20 years since they've been in it. But it's not just the Champions League football that's getting added to their busy schedule. It's their ability to replicate what they did last season. Will they be able to bring up the goals like Ollie Watkins did? Will he be able to replicate his form? Will they be able to make up the goals that Douglas Luiz added to the team? What Diaby was able to bring to the team? I just don't think that they're going to be able to replicate that goal count that they did last season. Emery is a good coach, but he will struggle, and so will Aston Villa. In 6th place, I have Newcastle. Newcastle have a solid team, but my main concern is whether they'll be able to stay fit and whether enough has been done in the transfer market so far. Being fit was a big issue for Newcastle, and not much seems to be being done in regards to fixing that. There has been no real transfer purchases that seem to be a replacement in case one of their star players gets injured. The team is good. You have the likes of Isak, Bruno Guimaraes, you have Pope, Trippier. So it's a very solid team, but I just don't think that they'll be able to keep some of those players. Some of those players could end up leaving. There was a lot of transfer rumors for both Bruno Guimaraes and Isak leaving, but if they're able to keep them for the whole season, if they're able to keep Isak scoring goals, Bruno controlling the midfield, I think they'll have a pretty good team. I think the other teams have strengthened a little bit better, and there's a lot of ifs with this Newcastle team, so I can't have them any higher than 6 as of right now. In 5th place, I have Tottenham. Spurs seems to be going in the right direction with the players that they are bringing in. Solanke will be a big upgrade to Richarlison. Having Richarlison as your main number 9 is just not the way to go to the future. Archie Gray is an energetic backup to bring into the midfield. Their starting 11 is already solid as is. Their midfield is pretty good, is young, energetic. Their defense is defensively solid. They didn't allow too many goals when they were getting the system going correctly. I had them 5th because the other 4 just seem to be, again, strengthening better than the ones I have mentioned before. And considering this is only Ange's 2nd season, I could see them struggling a bit because when it seems to happen a lot that a Premier League's manager's 2nd season is always tougher than his first one. So I'm curious to see how Ange and Spurs look towards the Premier League season, but I think 5th is a good spot for them, and they'll end up getting Champions League football anyway, so that's going to be a big plus for them. In 4th place, I have Manchester United. Now, I think they have done really good in the transfer market. They have brought in the likes of Yoro, Xerxes, De Ligt, Mazraoui, and there's still more rumors going around of who else that they're going to bring in. My prediction is coming after the Community Shield, where I think they were the better team in the Community Shield. They were just unlucky to concede a last-minute goal and lose on penalties, but it is what it is. I think City is probably, the favorites for every Premier League season, so giving them a good match is always a plus, and you can see that United is going in the right direction. Last season was the worst season ever, but it was due to the fact that there was a huge amount of injuries Ten Hag just didn't seem to know what he was doing. But I think this season is going to be Ten Hag's like make it or break it season. This is going to be his third season. He's getting the backing that he wants. There's changes being made to the club. So I think at this point, if he doesn't perform well this season, I think this might be Ten Hag's last season. But I think there's no reason for why Manchester United can't come forth with the improvements that we've been seeing and the new players being brought in. In third place, we have Liverpool. No real transfers have been made since Klopp has left, and Klopp leaving will have a big impact on the club. No team has gone without a little bit of regression when a big manager leaves after having a stint of like 10 years. It happened with United with Fergie. It happened with Arsenal with Wenger. And it's going to happen to Liverpool with Klopp. I just don't think it's going to be as much of a difference in quality as it was with the previous two mentioned clubs. I think Slot will do good with Liverpool. He will come in third because Liverpool's team is still arguably one of the best teams in the league. The only thing is that just they haven't strengthened much. But in all honesty, I don't know if they do need to increase much. They still have arguably the best center back, the best right winger, the best goalkeeper, the best right back in the league. So they still have a lot going for them, but I just don't think that's going to be good enough to compete with both Arsenal and City. So Liverpool's going to finish third in my prediction. And in second place, we have Arsenal. Arsenal's going to finish second for the third year in a row. And I just don't think they can compete with City. I view them as like a mini City. They're like a City 0.7, a City 0.8. And you can't beat City trying to imitate City. Last season, they came close. And I say close. But in reality, in my opinion, it was only because City was lacking. City wasn't going at it like 100% that they could. Arsenal just can't seem to compete unless City is a struggling team. And they don't have enough going forward. Despite how defensively solid they are, they need to bring in a number 9. And I don't think Arteta is bringing a number 9. So I think that's going to be a big difference in why they just can't compete with City. They seem to be imitating City almost every little thing except for the striker's position. So them not having a true goal scorer, I think is going to be the main reason that they just can't compete with City. So I have them second again. And winning the Premier League for the 5th time in a row, I have City. The Prem is becoming a farmers' league, and it's going to stay like that until Guardiola leaves. It is what it is. They have too much depth, and in the squad they have too much talent, and it's only going to continue to grow. They brought in the likes of Salvinho. They did get rid of Julian, but nobody really seems too fussed about Julian leaving. That just shows how good Manchester City is as a team. Haaland's going to break 25 goals. De Bruyne's going to bag in his assists. It's going to be the same story as always. There might be a little bit of tension. City might be looking like they're lacking. They might not be in the lead with 10 games to go, but we all know how the story ends anyway. So it's a boring ending to the Premier League prediction, but that's what I think. I think that's going to be my top 3. It'll be City, Arsenal, Liverpool. Hopefully there's some surprises. And let me ask you this. If you manage to make it through the whole video, let me know who you think I'm a fan of. I'm curious to see what you guys think based on where I have every single team placed in them. But that is for my Premier League predictions. I hope I see you for the next video. If you could like and subscribe or comment anything, just have some interaction. It'll be greatly appreciated. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks.